Welcome back, everyone. So, recently, there is a right-leaning person that I am subscribed to. I think I met him back in the days when I was doing the anti-pedophilia video series, and he was the one that introduced or told me about Amos Yee. And I've sort of been like watching his channel here and there. Very interesting. Different eye views of me. I don't agree with him on everything, but I'm not like about it either. And but he made a video that was very, very interesting and brought up a very interesting philosophical concept that happens between the left and the right, having to deal with abortions and the death penalty. So, I'd like to show for you his depiction, his eye view of why he's going to stop supporting the death penalty and be opposed to the death penalty so that he can continue to be an advocate, supporter of pro-life.
I think that one of the ways that you could get an edge up in this debate, in this conversation, and again, by the way, it's not really a debate anymore. These far left progressives and Democrats, a lot of them are so pro-death with infants, it shocks me that they're actually against the death penalty. It shocks me because that's also a hypocrisy on their end. So what I've decided to do, because I want to be ideologically consistent in opposing the government sanctioning the death of another human being. And the problem is, and so I have decided that I am going to now oppose the death penalty. And I'm getting very tired of the left sort of using the straw man of the death penalty to try and pigeonhole conservatives into being hypocrites. So what they basically say is, oh, you oppose abortion because you're killing a living being, but the death penalty is okay. And, I've been really thinking about it. And I'll be honest with you, I feel like deep down inside, I do believe that society does have the right to defend itself from ruthless criminals. However, I do believe that once somebody is captured, there's really not a lot that they can do to society. There's a lot of scumbags out there that deserve to die. But should the government be killing them? Should, in order to be ideologically consistent when you're talking to a far left progressive who is completely pro-abortion,
Mr. Anderson.
Alright, so the entire video is 9 minutes, and I've only cut down to what I think is the core base of the argument. And in this part, I think he's talking about third trimester abortions specifically. Now, I am in support of first trimester abortions, and the third trimester abortion was kind of a very, very strange concept because I felt like nobody was being honest about what, like, some people were saying the only thing that the Virginia bill did was make it so that instead of 3 doctors, it was only 1 doctor, and that it was basically like a type of pregnancy that it usually induces a miscarriage, and if the miscarriage doesn't happen, they can abort it. And it's not just Virginia and New York that do it. I found somebody on Facebook that I believe they did some work as an RN that had something to say about it, and so I want to show you that now.
There is zero chance that the baby cannot be delivered by C-section. At that late stage, if there were any health issues for the mother, but a pregnancy would show signs earlier on if there was going to be an issue. It is almost a totally moot point. They put that in there so often that it really is when ectopic pregnancy happens, neither will survive because there is not room for the zygote to grow, and the growth will cause the mother's death. Therefore, at that stage, they can do an abortion, although most of the time, a spontaneous abortion occurs via nature, miscarriage. The late-term abortions, as horrific as it is to accept, also have a financial component. They let the child start to be delivered so that they can salvage body parts to sell. The hospital can sell the stem cells and other organs. As for the other aspect, that a teen cannot change their mind in the last 2 months. Someone said they can't get one wrong. In theory, because the law is so vague, literally any reason can be given, such as mentally. It would be upsetting to the mother, ergo, mother at risk. And now, not even doctors have to perform them, only a quote-unquote medical professional. So, a chiropractor, dentist, anyone in the medical field, I guess even the guy who stocks the bandages. If you want to stretch it that far, as long as the fetus doesn't make it all the way out of the body, it can and is being done not just in New York. It is horrific. You need to only ask OB nurses. They will tell you of the pain and screaming of the fetus. Abortion itself is controversial, but after the first trimester, it is murder.
All right. So that being said, third trimester abortion is not something that I think I could stand behind personally, because you are talking about a fully developed human being at that point. The whole thing with the first trimester abortion, Ben Shapiro loves to say that after a week the heartbeat already starts, and that is true. But the reason why we choose the first trimester is because it doesn't look like a human. Okay, it looks like an amphibian creature. It hasn't developed its central nervous system. It's not cognizant. It's not a sentient being at that point. It is literally just a clump of cells that is slowly developing, that one day will be developed into a baby fetus, a human fetus. It'll look more human-like, and it'll have the central nervous system developed and be able to feel pain. But at the first trimester, it just does not have that ability. Now, third trimester abortion, I don't think is something that I can get behind. I can understand the argument that it is presenting a threat to the female's life. Basically, if both people are going to die, by all means, kill the thing killing her. She can try again. We could do it again. And I would agree with him. We shouldn't be aborting kids because they're going to have autism or Down syndrome or something like that. I think it's funny that he says that we should conduct studies on them. The way that he puts it is kind of weird. But I do agree with that there could be... This is pushing towards an anti-Darwinian society, which is ultimately a good thing. And when we can get somebody who is born with that kind of... when they're born like that, if we can get them to be able to have a standard of living that is indicative of somebody who doesn't have a disorder of some kind, that would be really great. So the next part is him talking about the death penalty, which I find really interesting. And so I guess let's go ahead and have a look at how he feels about the death penalty now.
And the reason I'm going to oppose the death penalty is, first off, if you capture someone, whether it's a serial killer, a psycho, a rapist, whatever, a lifetime in a prison cell is a ridiculously horrible punishment. To put people in a cell for the rest of their life. They shouldn't have... the death penalty, to be honest with you, I think is honestly, I feel like that's the easy way out. I feel like sitting in a cell for the rest of their life is a much worse punishment. So, my new stance on the death penalty is I'm going to be, regardless of how weird it makes me feel, I am going to stand against the death penalty. And I'm going to do that because, first off, we know people who are innocent of crimes have been charged by the government. There is people, I guarantee you, there is people who have been wrongly convicted of a crime and murdered by their government.
All right. So I actually agree with him on this, and I'm sure that's no surprise. I'm not a fan of the death penalty. It doesn't work. But I'll get into that in a minute because he has more to say about the death penalty. And by the way, I put the Mr. Anderson in there for comedic effect. So don't take that personal, Michael Anderson, if you watch this video. I just thought that was funny. I just haven't noticed that. But a thing that I wanted to add that there was a Holocaust survivor that came over to the U.S. that studied crime statistics, became a criminologist here in the United States. She was opposed to the death penalty after surviving the Holocaust even. She was opposed to it. And her primary argument for that was that, well, not primary, but one of the arguments that she gave that I found interesting was in statistical data. She said that there is something around the percentage of 98% of murders committed are crimes of passion, meaning that they're not premeditated, that only 2% of murders are premeditated. So I wanted to throw that piece of information out there. Now, that was coming from early 2000s, late 90s, so that number might have changed. But there's another thing that I want to add. But first, I want to show the part of the clip where he talks more in depth about why he feels that he is going against the death penalty. And then I'll tell you why I'm against the death penalty. But I'd also like to say that the correlation between, like, I'd be willing to bet, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'd be willing to make a gentleman's wager, which means there's no exchange of monetary anything. Just a gentleman's bet, a gentleman's wager, that he is probably against first trimester abortions, which is something that I do not perceive as murder. It is not state or government sanctioned murder, but the death penalty absolutely is. He is correct about that. That is government or state sanctioned murder. So two wrongs don't make a right, do they? That's what we've been taught. But I do perceive third trimester abortion as murder because this is the tricky part. When you're not religious, the moral compass is vague, apparently, because it's hard for people to understand. The morality is subjective. There is no objective morality. It's only objective in the sense that we as a society decide what is right and wrong. But there's usually some pretty good logical, rational reasoning behind it. There's a logical, rational reasoning behind being against murder. And that comes through empathy and sympathy. But one of the ways that we draw that line on the third trimester, like I said, is because of the development of the ability to feel pain. And that's something that was talked about in that thing that I read by the RN, where she was talking about the screams of the fetus, which is probably something you can absolutely do. I'm not so sure how much merit I can put into selling stem cells, because stem cell research has been made illegal in the United States. Other countries, not so much, but the United States has banned stem cell research, even though we can use stem cell research to grow organs, human organs, and being put on an organ donor list would be a thing of the past if we would let that happen. We don't want to use stem cells so that we can clone people. That would be unethical. I'm going off in a different direction. So that is why I perceive third trimester abortion more murderous than a first trimester abortion of a clump of cells that does not feel or cannot understand pain and is not cognizant nor sentient in any way, shape, or form. Clearly, a person who is out of the womb and separated from the mother and capable of making cognitive decisions based on their own behalf is sentient at that point. And if you take their life, you are making the biggest infringement upon their rights, liberties, and freedoms as an individual that you can possibly make. Obviously. And I like the idea of keeping people locked away in prison, like he was saying, but I like the idea of it because they're not hurting anyone in society anymore at that point. And if they're locked away with a lot of other murderers, rapists, child molesters, they can live out that type of lifestyle away from the general population that want nothing to do with it. So we're not advocating state-sanctioned murders. We're not taking life. We're not practicing an eye for an eye type philosophy. It's just get them away from the general population so they cannot inflict harm upon others, but far be it from any of us to be the judge of who gets to live and who gets to die. And I know that sounds hypocritical going back to the first trimester abortion and being in support of it, but essentially that's stopping a life before it happens, not something that is sentient, like even an ant, a bug, your pet, a guinea pig, a rabbit, anything like that is sentient. I don't know about single-celled organisms, but we don't particularly care about them. We generally try to kill them, bacteria, things like that. So, with that, I'll give you this final say on state-sanctioned murder, so the death penalty.
To be able to murder its own citizens when they cannot defend themselves or when they're not actively breaking the law or doing anything wrong. It is against my moral code to allow the government to kill anyone, even because there is a chance. For example, if somebody's innocent, there is a chance that that person could be innocent. There is a chance that the government could kill an innocent person. And I don't think that one death of one innocent person is worth the death of 1,000 guilty people.
All right, and the final thing that I'm going to add to the death penalty case that I can put in his corner is this. The death penalty does not deter crime. The only thing the death penalty accomplishes is revenge. It satisfies that kind of notion of revenge, and that's all that it accomplishes. It does not deter crime in any way, shape, or form. We have had the death penalty for centuries, and people still commit atrocities. And that is the best way that I could describe them, some of the things that these people on death row have done. I don't think that they need to die. I mean, that's just trading crime for crime at that point. But it doesn't stop. When you kill somebody who is murderous, another one comes along. So it doesn't work as an effective deterrent of crime, and you're just taking another life. So it's okay for that. It's not okay for them to take a life for whatever reason that they felt deemed necessary for taking a life, but it's okay for the government to make that call and decision. So this is one of the core principles to my problem with the death penalty, is it seems senseless. And I really think that an abortion, because I mean, this really is like a good argument against the left and their pro-abortion. And I really don't like the term pro-life, because everybody's pro-life, or should be. It's whether or not you're for or against abortion. And until the introduction of third trimester abortion, first trimester abortion I had no problem with. I'm going to reiterate this. Third trimester abortion I do have a problem with. First trimester, I don't. And unless somebody can provide to me some kind of evidence to suggest that if a C-section isn't good enough and the only way to save that person's life is to have a third trimester abortion, then fine, I would agree with it, because you're talking about saving a life at that point. Not destroying it because they're going to be born mentally retarded or handicapped or something like that. That is not a legitimate argument to abort a person. But to save a life, I can see that argument. I can see that. But I have yet to see a case stated to me where that was necessary to do. And many people have told me that this is something that can be avoided. Is that we don't need to do a third trimester abortion. That is not necessary. There are other things that we can do to protect the female from having damage done to her, like killing her. But the other problem is in third trimester abortion, the argument of mental problems, mental stress. That is not a reason to abort a third trimester child, a living sentient being. I can't rationalize that. I can't do it. I can rationalize doing it first trimester. I cannot rationalize doing it at third trimester. I can't do it. I can't rationalize taking the life of a sentient being unless it is for survival purposes only. That is the only way I can do it. Even like with when it comes to hunting, I have no problem with people hunting. I just really wish people would get in the practice of using every part of the animal. I personally could not kill an animal unless my intentions were to either protect myself because it was going to kill me or presented a threat to me in some way, or because I needed food. So it's about survival at that point. So he's making a very good argument for the right to say that they should be against capital punishment, so that way that it doesn't make them hypocritical when they go up against being against abortion. That's absolutely a legitimate claim. And it does make it more complicated to debate. Because then you have to start drawing the moral compass. Where does it end and where does it begin on what we consider to be life? Where does it end, where does it begin, what we consider to be sentient? And I've already defined that. Central nervous system, consciousness, some level of awareness. That's where I define it. So, like, a baby may not, when you're newborn, you don't have memories from there, but the brain is still very, very functioning, and it can retain information. There's some level of consciousness there. It's not a level of cognizance to that of an adult or even a 2-year-old, but it's still a level of cognizance nonetheless. And I can't rationalize taking that from somebody. I simply couldn't. So that's why I stick to the first trimester until somebody can provide for me a legitimate case of why we would need to do third trimester abortion. Other than that, like this whole like protecting the woman from dying thing seems to be not accurate, unfortunately. So then we also get into the topic of assisted suicide.
That includes assisted suicide. If you want to commit suicide, you can kill yourself. You can take your life with your own hands. It's your life to take.
Now, the assisted suicide thing, that is an interesting concept in and of itself, because assisted suicide generally doesn't pertain to people who suffer from depression or have mood disorders of various kinds, or people who slip down the downward spiral because life is just going hectic for them. Generally, assisted suicides come from like vegetative states and certain types of problems that you don't develop until you are elderly, like geriatric. We're talking long-term care facility type stuff. Now, there's many states where assisted suicide is not legal. I live in one. So what a lot of people opt to do instead of assisted suicide is something called a DNR. They put this in their paperwork called do not resuscitate. Meaning that basically, like, if I go into cardio arrest, don't revive me, I'm done. I'm over, don't revive me. Because with our medical technology today, we can essentially keep a person alive for a very, very long period of time, whether they can move or not. And after working in a long-term care facility and seeing some of the patients that I had to deal with, at first I didn't understand a DNR. Now I understand a DNR. And actually, when I get to that age, I want a DNR on my paperwork. Because if I'm suffering from dysphagia and atrophy, do not resuscitate me. That is not living. That is existing. And you have all of your independence stripped of you. You have no independence left. And we're not even sure if there's much cognizance left. We have to assume that as a nurse. You have to assume that and treat them as though they have cognizance. You're not supposed to talk to them like they're a little child. You're supposed to talk to them like they're a grown adult, but very polite. You have to be very, very respectful because these people have lost a lot of dignity. And you have to respect that. So when I saw that, that's when I understood assisted suicide. When somebody is dying slowly and painfully from cancer, and they're not gonna live, I think it's respectable to honor an assisted suicide, which is basically, you don't inject them like lethal injection them. You can basically put them on a morphine drip, and this is something that we already do when hospice takes over. You get a lot of really strong, really good fucking drugs. They give you a sense of euphoria where you can drift in and out of consciousness, and eventually you will die at a high state of euphoria in your sleep. And this is probably about the best way you can go in that state. Believe me, I've seen it. So when I think of assisted suicide, I don't think of people who are suicidal that are between the ages of, I don't know, like, let's just go as low as 7 or 5. I think that's when I started having depressive suicidal thoughts. Those are roughly around between the age of 5 and 7, all the way up to, like, I don't know, maybe like 80s or 70s or something. But that even then, 70s and 80s is where you start talking about people living in long-term care facilities, suffering from things like dysphagia and atrophy. If I'm atrophied and I go into cardiovascular failure, don't resuscitate me. If I'm atrophied, don't do it. Let me die. Having atrophy is fucked. It's really fucked. And dysphagia too. And dysphagia, if you notice a patient with dysphagia, that's when hospice gets called in, because the person at that point probably doesn't have that much long to live, because dysphagia is where they can no longer swallow food. And we can keep them alive. We can resuscitate them and keep them alive through a feeding tube. But for me personally, there's no point anymore. You're literally existing. You're keeping that person alive just for the sake of life as sacred, and it's like this there's no life left. You can't wipe your own ass. You can't speak for yourself. There's just so much you can't do anymore. And I don't really consider that living. You're dead. You're already dead. And so I think Michael Anderson made a really good video. And I think that this is a very interesting concept, that he's going to take a stance against the death penalty, which I think many people should, whether you're on the left or the right, because this is about moving our society forward into an even more enlightened. We've already passed the Enlightenment age, let's become further enlightened and really ask ourselves, why are we taking the life of somebody because they took, for what, revenge? Revenge doesn't accomplish anything. It won't fix the feeling of loss of the family members, because ultimately that's the person who has to suffer the most. The person who suffers the most in any death, whether it be from the death penalty or because somebody killed them, is the person who goes on living that loved that person. They suffer the most, not the person who's dead. They're dead. They don't feel the pain of this mortal coil anymore. Whether you believe in an afterlife or not, I think you can identify with that. They're gone. They're not here anymore. From my perspective as a gnostic atheist, somebody who absolutely is pretty fucking sure there's no goddamn God, there's no afterlife, you just die, and that's a cease of cognizance, of consciousness itself. You know, you're going to shed this mortal coil at some point, and after that happens, well, if you have no cognizance, there's nothing there to perceive pain, so you're not in pain. But the people who loved and cared about you, it's a pain you'll never, ever, ever, ever render. It'll never be fixed. It's a scar. It's a mental scar you carry with you for the rest of your life. And same when we put somebody to death, that person still has family that care about them. They will have to live with that pain forever. And even the person, like, let's say the person murders a family member, and you watch them die, well, that's not going to remedy the fact of how much it hurts that you miss your loved one. It's not going to bring them back. It's not a magical cure for that type of pain, and that type of pain is just something that you will have to carry for the rest of your life. Trust me, I know that far too well too. I wish I didn't, but I do. I think he made a great video, though, and I think many people should be against the death penalty because it does not deter crime and it doesn't accomplish anything. And then therefore carries the debate on abortion. Third trimester, I'm not totally sold on that. The only argument, like I said, that has been put forth to me about third trimester abortion that I could possibly see is that if the abortion is not done, it is detrimental to the female's livelihood. So we're talking about survival and safety. But I've been told that that is not the case. So if that is not a reason that we actually can use for a third trimester abortion, then there is, so far, from my understanding, any information that's been given to me, there is no rational reason for a third trimester abortion that I have found. If there actually is cases where if you have to abort the baby because it's going to kill the woman, okay. But if there aren't cases like that, I can't rationalize that. But I'm still in favor of first trimester abortion. And I think first trimester abortion is not something like, oopsie doopsies, like I just didn't want to wear a condom. It's not like that. It's not like that. It's from my understanding from talking to women, it's a very, very difficult decision. Very difficult decision to make. Because they have that maternal bond, but there's other things that go into play. Like, for instance, my mother she had to have one. She used birth control. She used condoms, but still ended up getting pregnant. And at her age, it was a health risk. And now before it got to third trimester, she had it aborted before you could even tell she was pregnant. So we are talking about something that big. And she did that because it was a detriment to her health because of her age. She is close to menopause. She is hitting menopause. And to be pregnant in that stage of her life is dangerous. And on top of that, she is not financially prepared for it. And on top of that, the guy would not be involved in that child's life either. It just wasn't anything. These things happen. It's a difficult decision to make. Even that scenario given, it's still a difficult decision. So I don't think that we should make abortion illegal, because if you do that, women will be doing it anyway. And that leads to unsafe, not medically, medically approved practices. On-medically approved practices will be in play, and that becomes a real threat to the women, and then you start making criminals out of those women as well. So I don't think it should be illegal. I think that it should be a service that is provided by the medical industry. I don't think it's something that should be used like condoms. It's a last resort, or like I don't know what else to do at that point. It's an act of desperation, not the norm. There shouldn't be like a Walmart for abortions, or like a drive-through abortion. That shouldn't happen. No, this is something out of desperation, a medical procedure that should be taken very, very seriously. And that is why we choose the first trimester, not second trimester, not third trimester, first trimester. And that's my say on it. And if you would like to see Michael Anderson's video, I have the link in the description below. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit the bell button on any channel you're subscribed to. With that, out.